Good evening, everyone. And on behalf of the American Center in Moscow, I'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Amira Tlukhanova, and I'm a literary enthusiast from Moscow who studied literature in Lincoln, Nebraska. And tonight, I'm delighted to host a reading by a wonderful poet, Naomi Shihab Nye. Naomi, welcome to the series.
Thank you so much, Samira.
Naomi Shihab Nye is a Palestinian-American writer, editor, and educator who grew up in St. Louis, Jerusalem, and San Antonio, Texas, where she continues to live. She has been Young People's Poet Laureate for the U.S., poetry editor for the New York Times Magazine and the Texas Observer, and a visiting writer in hundreds of schools and communities all over the world. Her books include Everything Comes Next, The Tiny Journalist, Voices in the Air, City's Secrets, Habibi, This Same Sky, and The Tree is Older Than You Are, poems and paintings from Mexico. Her volume, 19 Varieties of Gazelle, Poems of the Middle East, was a finalist for the National Book Award. The Turtle of Oman and the Turtle of Michigan have both been part of the Little Read program, North Carolina. She received Lifetime Achievement Award from the Texas Institute of Letters and the National Books Critics Circle. And tonight, Naomi is going to read her poems for us for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we'll get a chance to ask some questions. So you can drop them in the chat, and I'll be happy to post them to the poet tonight. And our team at AMC also posted on social media the links to the poems that will be read tonight, accompanied by their translation, so you can follow along. And Naomi, welcome to Meet the Poet.
Thank you so much, Samira, and thank you. Greetings to everyone who is joining us. I'm speaking to you from Texas. It's morning here, and it's an honor to be connected through words across all the wide spaces. My best wishes to you all and my gratitude to the American Center in Moscow and to you, Samira, for hosting me. Thank you. The poems I'll read tonight are from a few different books, many of them from the book Voices in the Air, but some from other books as well. I'm starting with quite an older poem. I dedicate it to everyone here, called Kindness. And I felt this poem came to me in a moment when I really needed it. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you. He too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. When I was a child and began writing poems, I imagined that words could help us have a bigger life if we sent our words out into the world. We didn't know where they might go. And I would say, of all my poems, probably kindness has had its own biggest life because that's what people need the most in every country. To manage. She writes to me, "I can't sleep because I'm 17. Sometimes I lie awake thinking, I didn't even clean my room yet, and soon I will be 25 and a failure. And when I am 50, oh, I write her back, slowly, slow, clean one drawer, arrange words on a page. Let them find one another, find you. Trust they might know something. You aren't living the whole thing at once. That's what a minute said to an hour. Without me, you are nothing. Um, to see the aurora borealis, which I'm sure is visible to many people in your countries, uh, is truly one of the world's great experiences. And we have seen it for one season only from Alaska. The light was speaking to me, stretching out its long, gleaming fingers, pointing down. Maybe it could hear my shout. Shimmering green parentheses put me in my place. My place was low. Every earthbound element, Alaska gas, Sam's sourdough cafe, lifting into radiance. Snow felt less cold. Tiny human leaping under green swoops, rippled fringes, staggering swish, middle of night. By myself, not by myself. Came so close, I almost felt more than I had been waiting for. What possible tellings? Purple, purple, purple. You saw nothing, knew nothing before now. Now, what do you know? Occasionally, we write about these dramatic, incredible experiences, but more often, in my case, I write about little things that aren't so staggering in their beauty or memories. This poem comes from a very particular memory of a particular person. Bully. One boy in our grade school was considered a bully, muttering rude insults under his breath, tripping girls as they walked to their desks. He bothered everyone equally, shook his shaggy blonde hair when teachers called his name. My mom, hearing the tales, decided he was lonely. No one ever played with him. In those days, bullies weren't popular, and committed me to attending a children's Christmas party with him in the basement of a Methodist church. Somehow, she arranged this plan with his mother as they waited for us by the schoolyard. Impressive, he had a mother who waited. He seemed like a person who sprang from a forest, growling. My parents argued about the Christmas party every night before it happened. Daddy said Mom was sacrificing me to her idealism. He kept calling it my first date. I was only interested in what people did in basements of churches and what I would wear and would there be cake. Since we ate no sugar at our house, idealism, I dreamed of meeting sweets everywhere else. The night of the party, Bully wore a suit and striped tie. He didn't growl. It was his church, but he didn't seem to know anyone. I stood in my puffed pink icing of a ruffled dress by the cake table and watched him. He skulked around while the choir sang Christmas songs, looked embarrassed when Santa appeared. I talked to him any time he came near. Would you like some cake? I don't recall him bothering me again at school for the rest of our years. Bamboo mind, popping profusely, small shoots of glimmering interest. Can you feel the inner nudge? Something wants to grow, needs sun, pressing up between blades of grass you thought were your real thoughts. It was lace on a life to have a mother. Think of it, the idea of being, where it begins, then changes, her voice inside you, with your heart and stomach, crooning, singing, yelling, welling up like wind. The scent of her, texture of skirt or trousers when you start gripping on, watching her to see if she laughed. The sweater she is always knitting for 10 years with green mountains in it. She is taking care of you. You will be that way. No, never that way. Viewing your own beside everyone else's. Not everyone should be a mother. My friends whose mothers died when they were 4 or 10 had such different lives. We all had different lives. Hers was not mine. Mine could never be yours. Voracious hunger of a mother. Fantasy of shaping another person. You will never be lonely now. Always terribly lonely. She is standing behind you in the doorway, watching you stride up the hill in rain boots. The lost art of perfect mothers. Realms of exhaustion. Be here on time, she said. But we were living in different time zones. I wanted to be everything she wanted me to be. Cherry tree full of gifts. Row of silent, shaggy pines between our house and the neighbors. Steadfast through snow, never bending. Worry was her secret child. It adopted her before I was born. But she tried to be its mother too. You could never tell it what to do. Many times we write about people in our families or other people's families or neighbors, people we witness. I've always thought one of the jobs of poetry is to cherish life, to pay attention to small details, to hold, to describe, to remember. So this poem was for our first and only grandson, who is now 7 years old, but it's called To Babies. May polar bears welcome you to northern Manitoba, their lumbering grace marking the ice. May there still be ice. May giant trees lean over your path in warm places, brush your brow. So many details now disappeared. Tiny toads in deserts, fireflies. Where are the open window screens, whispers of breeze against a sleeping cheek? If we stop poking holes in soil, watching onions grow, what will we know? If we no longer learn cursive, will our hand muscles disintegrate? You blink, beginning to focus. Where will the lost loops go? We dream you will have so much to admire. Messages from everywhere light up our backyard. A bird that flew 5,000 miles is trilling 6 bright notes. This bird flew over mountains and valleys and tiny dolls and pencils of children I will never see. Because this bird is singing to me, I belong to the wide wind, the people far away who share the air and the clouds. Together we are looking up into all we do not own, and we are listening. For a long time, it's seemed as if the sky is one of the big things that binds us. And this is a poem thinking of kitchen tools. I really like spoons, and common, humble tools that we use in the kitchen just to cook a meal, basic things. And I was dreaming up, making up an assignment for writing, creating a metaphor for ourselves. I have worked with kids for 50 years now, so working with children and young people and thinking of ways to encourage them to write has been central to my thinking about poetry. When our English teacher gave our first writing invitation of the year, become a kitchen implement in 2 descriptive paragraphs, I did not think butcher knife or frying pan. I thought immediately of soft flour showering through the little holes of the sifter and the sifter's pleasing circular swishing sound, and wrote it down. Rhoda became a teaspoon, Roberto a funnel, Jim a muffin tin, and Forrest a soup pot. We read our paragraphs out loud. Abby was a blender. Everyone laughed and acted giddy, but the more we thought about it, we were all everything in the whole kitchen. Drawers and drainers, singing teapot, and grapefruit spoon with serrated edges. We were all the empty cup, the tray. This, said our teacher, is the beauty of metaphor. It opens doors. What I could not know then was how being a sifter would help me all year long. When bad days came, I would close my eyes and feel them passing through the tiny holes. When good days came, I would try to contain them gently, the way flour remains in a sifter until you turn the handle. Time, time. I was a sweet sifter in time, and no one ever knew. When my Palestinian father came to the United States, he liked learning a few popular songs from the 1950s and 60s, and he would sing them over and over again. And he loved a song that went, "What kind of fool am I?" He sang with abandon, combing his black, black hair. Each morning in the shower, first in Arabic, rivery ripples of song, carrying him back to his first beloved land. Then in English, where his repertoire was short. "No kind at all," we'd shout, throwing ourselves into the brisk arc of his cologne for a morning kiss. But he gave us freedom to be fools if we needed to, which we certainly would later, which we all do now and then. Perhaps a father's greatest gift, that blessing. My Palestinian grandmother never left Palestine except once to go on pilgrimage to Mecca. My grandmother in the stars. It is possible we will not meet again on earth. To think this fills my throat with dust. Then there is only the sky tying the universe together. Just now, the neighbor's horse must be standing patiently, hoof on stone, waiting for his day to open. What you think of him and the village's one heroic cow is the knowledge I wish to gather. I bow to your rugged feet, the moth-eaten scarves that knot your hair. Where we live in the world is never one place. Our hearts, those dogged mirrors, keep flashing us moons before we are ready for them. You and I on a roof at sunset, our two languages adrift, heart saying, take this home with you, never again, and only memory making us rich. Wedding Cake. Now, this is a poem that had many more details in it, but I tried to pare them down to just the basic essential details. It's absolutely true, and it happened on a very long flight. Once on a plane, a woman asked me to hold her baby and disappeared. I figured it was safe, our being on a plane and all. How far could she go? She returned 1 hour later, having changed her clothes and washed her hair. I didn't recognize her. By this time, the baby and I had examined each other's necks. We had cried a little. I had a silver bracelet and a watch. Gold studs glittered in the baby's ears. She wore a tiny white dress, leafed with layers, like a wedding cake. I did not want to give her back. The baby's curls coiled tightly against her scalp. Another alphabet. I read, "Nu, nu, nu. My mother gets tired. I'll chew your hand." The baby left my skirt crumpled, my lap aching. Now I'm her secret guardian, the little nub of dream that rises slightly but won't come clear. As she grows, as she feels ill at ease, I'll bob my knee. What will she forget? Whom will she marry? He'd better check with me. I'll say once she flew, dressed like a cake, between two doilies of cloud. She could slip the card into a pocket, pull it out. Already she knew the small finger was funnier than the whole arm. Everything changes the world. Boys kicking a ball on a beach, women with cook pots, men bombing tender patches of mint. There is no righteous position, only places where brown feet touch the earth. Maybe you call it yours. Maybe someone else runs it. What do you prefer? We who are far stagger under the mind blade. Every crushed home, every story worth telling. Think how much you'd need to say if that were your friend. If one of your people equals hundreds of hours, what does that say about people? Poems can't solve many of the big problems in the world, but sometimes I think they try to shine a little light on them or ask questions or think about the sorrows in a different way. Once, when I was visiting Japan, some poets there said, no one should write about the moon anymore The moon is too tired. So instantly, because poets are a little rebellious, I guess, I started writing a lot of poems where the moon was speaking. The moon was actually talking in my poems. I didn't read them in Japan, I just kept them in my notebook. But they made me laugh and made me think about things from a different perspective. This is called Moon Over Gaza. I am lonely for my friends. They liked me, trusted my coming. I think they looked up at me more than other people do. I, who have been staring down so long, see no reason for the sorrows humans make. I dislike the scuffle of bombs blasting very much. It blocks my view. A landscape of grieving feels different afterwards. Different sheen from a simple desert, rubble of walls, silent children who once said my name like a prayer. Sometimes I am bigger than a golden plate, a giant coin, and everyone gasps. Maybe it is wrong that I am so calm. Cross the sea. A girl in Gaza speaks into a table microphone. Do you believe in infinity? If so, what does it look like to you? Not like a wall, not like a soldier with a gun, not like a ruined house bombed out of being, not like concrete wreckage of a school's good hope, a clinic's best dream. In fact, not like anything imposed upon you and your family thus far in your precious 13 years. My infinity would be the never ending light you deserve, every road opening up in front of you. Soberly, she nods her head. In our time, voices cross the sea easily, but sense is still difficult to come by. Next girl's question. Were you ever shy? And sometimes a poem is just a quiet meditation. Standing back. If this is the best you can do, citizens of the world, I resolve to become summer shadow, turtle adrift in a pool. Today a frog waited in a patch of jasmine for drizzles of wet before dawn. The proud way he rose when water touched his skin, his simple joy at another morning. Compare this to bombing, shooting, wrecking in more countries than we can count. And ask yourself, human or frog? Twilight. Victor, the taxi driver, says, I love this time of day. This is when I say, never want to die, want to be here forever. Oh, maybe it will be possible in the shaggy heads of trees that barely felt us walking beneath them. The corners we turned so often, broken pavements, cracks and signatures, Daniel Lozano, 1962. All the days we entered thoughtlessly, forgetting to turn our heads or bow to the vine, finally making it over the fence, dangling blossom, orange cup of joy, ephemeral as we were here, imagining our deep roots. My father's name was Aziz, and this poem is for Aziz. I had not noticed the delicate yellow flower, strikingly thin petals, like a man with many hopes, or a woman with many dreams. The center, almost a tiny hive, ants could crawl in and out if they wished. Had not noticed the profusion of flowers on the path, had not stooped to absorb the silent glory of many petaled yellow, or remembered the freshness of my father's collar for some years now, the rush of anticipation circling his morning self, despite so much hard history and searing news. Who can help us? Yellow beam, spiral sunshine, legacy. I think a lot about the power of our ancestors in us and how we remember them in ways we can't even understand, how they are part of us always. And this is a poem written after staring at a painting I really loved in the Women's Museum. The painting is called Sheep by the Sea. It's by Rosa Bonheur, 1869, and she was a very beloved painter of her generation. The calm of your wool, rounded resting postures, hooves tucked under. Behind you, rolling waves pound, whitecaps against stones. Your eyes have been closed for 148 years, but you seem not to fear what is coming. You curl in repose, pink velvet of your ears, echoing the pink tips of the grasses. People have always been shepherds for sheep, but I'd like to let you lead. Quiet depth, a measured gentleness. Here in a museum in Washington, D.C. Excuse me. And just a few more poems here. This poem quotes the American writer Maya Angelou. Let gratitude be the pillow upon which you kneel. And when she was a young woman, she had an interesting job as a conductor on one of the cable cars on little tracks in the city of San Francisco, California, which is very steep. And these small train cars go up and down the hills to carry passengers. They still do it. And before she became a beloved, internationally acclaimed writer, she worked on these cable cars. Gratitude pillow. Maya loved the jingle of the massive key ring carried by cable car conductors. First woman in the San Francisco trolley uniform. She liked the shiny buttons on the jackets, appreciated the swoops and dips of the routes, sharp curves, corners, bustling avenues. Clinking coin dispenser latched to her belt. She'd be a conductor all her life. Write and talk. Take people everywhere, out of their tight little rooms. And if anybody told her they were going to Gloomy Street, she'd say, "What? Lift those eyes. Take a look at the sea to your right. Buildings full of mysteries. Schools crackling with joy. Open porches. Watch the world whirl by. All we are given. And shake that gloom right out of your system. Hope is the only drink you need to be drinking. Jingle, jingle. Step right up." And this quotes a Mexican poet at the beginning. The poem is called Tomorrow. Jose Emilio Pacheco, who was a businessman and poet in Chiapas, Mexico, said, "I like poetry to be the interior voice, the voice no one hears, the voice of the person reading it." What animal is waiting to hear what we have to say? Not one. Not the red-winged blackbird, the speckled trout, or the French chartreux. Beg an iguana for editorial advice. Whatever we do, slim drift on the wind. We could talk forever, never equaling the dawn song of the thrush. Pacheco said, "Fish don't torture. Their banks don't ever charge interest." We open our mouths. We find and hide the words. 2. My friend who knew him says, "I thought of him as a businessman only. A lawyer? Had no idea he wrote poems." She found him dignified, stately, quiet. Papers, envelopes, nice neckties, polished desk. Jose Emilio, your certain silences were invisible girders. They held everything up. Childhood stories, first moments. We go, never to come back. No wonder you translated Beckett, Yevtushenko, belonging to other worlds, deepened our own. You wanted to ask your old teachers if the future, tomorrow, lived up to their dreams. Everyone's hard work supposed to count for everything, right? Who predicted torture, murder, people disappeared? Didn't those people work hard too? Which animals live like this? Could metaphor soothe or save? There are 9 moths to every one butterfly. Your poems, at first surrealistic, then closer to home. Fancy awards, dramatic titles did not intrigue. Your pants fell down when meeting a king, but you hiked them up, calling it a cure for vanity. We love you forever for moments like this. Leaning into your pages all those years, working and working. Quote, "All that is truly ours now is the day that is beginning." Once we gleaned what went on in high places, our job to build something better. And my last poem is for the state that we have lived in for a long time, Texas, the second largest state in the United States. And we are renowned for many things, but my favorite thing about Texas is our big, beautiful sky and the wideness of the horizon. I can only imagine you feel that too in your country. Texas Remedy. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. Texas Remedy. Step outside at twilight. This sky won't wait. Crushed wrapper blowing down the street. Release what snares you. Then go chase that trash. Answer rising egret with your own breath. Yes, it's terrible, but the sky still looms larger than any place you ever called home. Remember what a door was for, letting in people you love, swinging wide, still, when no one is there and little recognized. Now it's the wind's turn. In Texas, always a wide chill coming to change the sky before the ground. Be patient. Sure, there's lots of bad around, but more room for good too, with all this empty. Goats that don't freeze, thirsty rivers, Ozona, Electra, and Alice, bearing their own sorrows and staggering joys. Blow a kiss to the far off town of your first real job. Long view, pretend it branded you. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi, for your mesmerizing course today. I also want to remind our audience to send your questions to Naomi so I can pose them to you. Robert, can we please put both of us on screen?
Hi, Zamira.
Oh, okay. There we go. Hi again, Naomi. Then I'll start with some questions. You started your poetry reading today with the poem "Kindness," and there were two questions I wanted to ask about it. First, you mentioned that it has the biggest life, and why do you think this poem has kind of like its own life? And the second question would be, why did you decide to start with this poem?
Well, thank you, Zamira, for that question. Maybe it's the most important thing. Maybe it's the most important thing we're here to learn in our lives about how much kindness means to us and how are we capable of sharing it, in how many ways, different ways, all the time as our lives change, who we share it with. But when I said that it has a biggest life, I just mean I feel like it's gone out to the most places because it came to me at a time when I needed it. I felt as if it was a gift for helping me, and I think poems really do want to help us. I think they come to us through us to serve us in some way, to help us think, help us put pieces together. And I think that as it goes out into the world, or as it has gone out, it found many friends, and everybody needs kindness in every single country. It's at the heart of life, so maybe that's why.
Thank you. And since you mentioned, the words and the poems, there was a quote from the one of the poems: "Can metaphors soothe or save?" Do
Mhm.
you believe that the metaphor can soothe and save?
Well, I know that it can soothe because many times, say you're having a bad time and you make a comparison in your mind, well, this is like some other thing, but I know that thing changes, so maybe this will also change. I don't know if it can save. Save is a little dramatic, but it can definitely soothe. Yeah.
And the very few, you mentioned that, if I'm not mistaken, that you found poetry, or you started writing poetry when you were a child.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about your becoming a poet?
Well, I was lucky to hear poems. My mother read some poems to me before I could read for myself, when I was 3 and 4, before I went to school, before I knew how to write. And I remember feeling that the language of poetry was not only extremely interesting to me, but I liked it because it didn't explain, and it didn't say too much. It just suggested things or gave us a picture to look at in our minds. And I remember thinking, I want to do that. I want to write, I want to pick words and write them down when I learn how to write. And so when I was 6 years old, I first started writing poems down on my school papers, and even the tiniest poem, 3 lines, 4 lines, uh, it felt as if it was something you could look at and think about differently than if you just held a thought in your mind. If you put it on the page, it took on a different reality. And you could also share it with someone, give it to someone else, or go away and come back, it would still be there. So I liked that satisfying feeling of the tiny power of shaping experience through words on a page. And I just never stopped doing it. No, I think most young poets are big readers too. So you keep reading other people's poetry. And since I had a bicultural household, parents from 2 different parts of the world, I was very interested in people's voices. I knew they didn't all sound the same. I knew they didn't talk about the same things. So poetry was another way to participate in that big family of voices out there, and feel closer to the globe, the planet.
This is a very curious answer. Thank you so much. I actually have to. I had a question about the prose, but since we're still on the question of heritage, you've written extensively about your Palestinian American heritage, and how has your cultural background influenced your poetry, and how do you navigate the complexities of writing about such, personal and in some way political issues?
Yeah. Well, we all have cultural heritage of some kind or another. And since it's what we're born into and we carry it with us wherever we go and it helps to shape us, I think trying to examine uh, what we carry and the ways we see the world is just a way to survive. And so uh, I think finding out early on that you could write about things that you knew about, that was enough. You didn't have to be an older person, a smarter person to have material. You could talk about the place you were at any given moment and find out more about it. And I see a question about hope, about staying hopeful. And I do think staying hopeful is a great challenge in our world. And it's a challenge every single day. If we pay any kind of attention at all, it's a challenge. And I think that it's much easier to survive if we can maintain some kind of hope, because it's what gives us energy and moves us forward and connects us to one another. And if we remain overwhelmed with all the grief of the world, which is certainly present, and we feel it in so many places and ways, um, it becomes very difficult even to wish to continue at all. So, it's almost as if it's a daily choice. How do we participate in beauty? How do we do something kind or positive? Um, Sometimes just encouraging children could feel like a kind act, or being kind to an animal, or yeah, something very small that's unseen by other people could be a hopeful kindness that keeps you going. But I think poetry is by nature hopeful. Poetry wants to think the best of us as humans. Poetry would like to um, explore our best selves. We have many selves as humans: the angry self, the worried self, the confused self. But I think poetry would like to help us remember our better selves.
Thank you. And there was a poem actually about better selves, I guess. The poem Bully. You said there was this particular story behind this poem. So I guess our audience would also be interested in hearing about it.
Well, it was just the story that everyone who went to that school remembers that boy. I still am friends with many people who went to that school, and when we were little children, and everybody remembers him. I mean, he was famous for not being friendly. And it strikes me in retrospect as just a mark of my own parents were very idealistic, hopeful people, and they really thought, well, if you're friendly to him, this could change him. And I'm not sure it changed him, but he did stop being unfriendly to me. Um, it's amazing how we remember the strangest things sometimes, and the person who becomes the landmark in your memory is not necessarily the person you loved the most or were closest to.
It's interesting. Like one act of kindness at a time, and like it changed at
Yeah,
least one
one
person's perspective.
little kindness. And Zamira, I think so much, and I think all poets do, about the mysteries of life. As long as we live, there's so much we can't understand. And we try to figure things out all of our lives. And many times it's some of the same things over and over again. And I think reading other people's poems can often help us see these mysteries of our own lives in new luminous ways. So I really encourage people to read poems. All the great poets we have access to in our own languages, in translated versions. Um, there's really so much available to read. And I think that it's an important way of staying connected to a deeper self. And and that's very important for the whole fabric of humanity, to feel as if we are, sharing experience, trying to have greater empathy for one another's problems, trying to understand what other people are going through. Always, it's not just one person's suffering. Everybody has different kinds of suffering, but many times similar. So how does poetry help us apprehend that?
Thank you. And since we're in the topic of, you kind of like advised or urged people to read more poetry, and since you are the Palestinian American author, can you recommend any Palestinian poets or writers that you would encourage us to read?
Sure. Well, a contemporary Palestinian that I hope everyone could read, and you can find him on the internet very easily, is Mossab Abu Toha. He's a young man. He had one book published in the United States last year, and it was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. He's a wonderful poet, and he describes daily life in Gaza, where he's from, very powerfully. The great Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish, who is renowned the world over, uh, is a very important poet to people of many cultures, an eloquent voice. And I would say Mahmoud Darwish uses metaphor to the maximum. He's possibly the most metaphorical poet I've ever loved. A great woman named Fadwa Tukan, um, whom I actually met, a very brave Palestinian woman poet, wonderful short poems. Um, Dr. Selma Hadra Jayusi, who devoted her life to translation from Arabic, was also herself a great poet. And I know that she came to Moscow and had friends all over the world and people who respected her work. Um, but so many poets in every country to keep discovering. We never run out.
And there is a question that someone sent from the audience: who had influenced you in your work?
Well, all the poets I've read,
Americans and okay.
all the poets I've read have influenced me, and especially the ones you love. Like when I was a child, I started loving Emily Dickinson. I still love her. Some poets are with you your whole life. I'm very fond of the American poet Edward Hirsch, who has written um, so many wonderful poems. Jane Hirshfield, another American poet, so beloved these days. But there are hundreds, thousands of names I could name. My favorite American poets were William Stafford and W.S. Merwin and Lucille Clifton. Those were three of my personal favorites growing up. And I'll read them all my life. And there is a question if I ever write in Arabic. No, because I'm ashamed I don't speak Arabic fluently at all. I only understand words, but I can't write in it.
Uh, but since you mentioned Arabic language and your like heritage from the father side, you mentioned that your power of ancestors and how we remember them, like how strong the power of ancestors is. How does that transpire in you? Like how does it affect you or influence you?
Well, we all know more than we think we know. And we all have certain inclinations or leanings in different directions or tendencies as human beings. There's also a question about empathy and understanding. I think, to try to have empathy for our ancestors hopefully gives us more empathy for our descendants, the people who come after us. What kind of world are we creating for them? What are we doing to the world they're in? How can we help them live better? How can we pass on the best things we know as we become the ancestors. And I think poetry operates in this deep timeline. You know, it's not just a one generation thing. It's a long thread of knowing and discovering and dreaming, and it has that timelessness that all art invites us to participate in. So I do think that one of the jobs of being an artist is to have greater empathy, and sometimes in a world like ours, that's hard. You almost wish you didn't, because you feel in so much pain a lot of the time for others' sufferings. But I treasure ancestry, and even my German and Swiss ancestors on my mother's side. um, I'm curious about them. You know, I've traveled to some of their towns, I've read their letters, I've tried to imagine their worlds, and it's always discovering, Zamira. You know, we never run out of things to discover.
It's actually a very curious, topic to me personally as well. And I guess, since um, America is such a place where the ancestry is such, I mean, the heritage is such a huge thing, because people come from all over the places in the world. It's interesting how kind of like how identity and how learning about your identity comes kind of like a crucial part of American community and society.
Yes, yes,
The reason.
that's a beautiful way to say it. The mixture. Thank you.
And it's
Sorry.
kind of like learning about yourself through conversations with people, and it's such a beautiful and very, I would say, it to me personally, it was a very American thing, because that's where you kind of value all the kind of eclectics of life of it's coming from. There is one last question, I guess, that I'll have time to ask. Can you recommend any contemporary American poets? Because here in Russia, we would like to learn more about contemporary poetry as well. So, are there any contemporary poets that you personally
Oh,
read and recommend?
oh yes, definitely. I could recommend just hundreds of them, but I will bring up a couple I just mentioned. W.S. Merwin, William Merwin, who died only a few years ago. William Stafford, who was truly a great American voice of the 20th century, but his voice is timeless, very contemporary. And two who are contemporary and writing a lot right now, Jane Hirschfield, Edward Hirsch, whom I mentioned, and also I'll say Danusha Lamaris, a poet I love very much, and a poet from Vermont named James Cruz. Those are some people I would urge people to look for. Zamira, thank you so much for hosting me this evening. It's been a pleasure to be in your company. I wish we could be sitting together for a cup of tea now.
Likewise, thank you so much for the opportunity to host it tonight, and thank you to American Center in Moscow for organizing the event. And thanks to the audience, and please fill out the survey so we can make our events better. And Naomi, till we met again.
Thank you so much.